Hey everyone, welcome to Time Echoes. I'm Alex and I'm here with my co-host Sophie. This is the podcast where we dig into history's biggest moments and what they mean for us today.
Thanks, Alex. So excited for this one. Today, we're talking about the fall of the Roman Empire, which is kind of a huge topic, right? Like, how does an empire that ruled for centuries just collapse?
Exactly. And it's not like there was one single reason. It was this slow motion disaster over hundreds of years. People often point to barbarians at the gates, but there's so much more to it.
Wait, before we get into that, I think we should set the stage. The Roman Empire at its peak was massive, right? Controlling most of Europe, North Africa, the Middle East. But by the 5th century AD, things were falling apart.
Yeah, and one big factor was economic trouble. The Romans had this massive inflation problem. They kept debasing their currency, like reducing the silver content in coins, so money became almost worthless.
Let's dive deeper into the economic factors. The Roman economy was built on conquest and plunder, but once expansion stopped, they had to rely on taxation and internal production. The problem was that the tax burden fell disproportionately to the lower classes, while the wealthy senatorial class was largely exempt.
That's a crucial point. And this tax inequality created massive social stratification. The gap between the rich and poor became enormous. The wealthy lived in incredible luxury with villas, slaves, and imported goods, while the average Roman citizen struggled with poverty and food shortages.
Oh, for sure. And that led to, price controls that didn't work, like under Emperor Diocletian. He tried to fix prices with edicts, but it just made things worse because, black markets popped up everywhere.
Right. And then there's the military side. The empire was stretched too thin, defending borders from all sides. They started relying on mercenaries, barbarian soldiers who weren't always loyal.
Let's talk about the military decline in more detail. The Roman army was once the most disciplined and effective fighting force in the ancient world. But over time, the quality of soldiers declined significantly. Why do you think that happened?
Several factors contributed to the military's decline. First, Roman citizenship was extended to more people, which diluted the sense of duty and patriotism. Second, the army became increasingly dependent on barbarian mercenaries, who had little loyalty to Rome itself. These mercenaries were often more loyal to their commanders than to the empire.
And the military equipment and training standards dropped too. The classic Roman legionary armor and weapons became too expensive to produce for the entire army. Many soldiers had to provide their own equipment, which led to inconsistent quality and effectiveness in battle. But wait, Alex, wasn't there also political instability? I mean, the 3rd century had like 50 emperors in 50 years. Constant civil wars, assassinations. It's amazing anything got done.
The political instability we mentioned earlier deserves more exploration. The crisis of the 3rd century was particularly devastating. Between 235 and 284 AD, there were at least 26 emperors, most of whom were assassinated or killed in battle. This constant turnover made long-term planning impossible and created a culture of paranoia and betrayal.
And the division of power between multiple emperors, the tetrarchy system established by Diocletian, while intended to provide stability, actually created competing power centers. The eastern and western halves of the empire often worked against each other rather than cooperating, which weakened their ability to respond to external threats.
Totally, and that weakened the central government. Emperors were more focused on staying in power than governing effectively. Plus, the bureaucracy was corrupt and inefficient.
Then there were the external pressures, like the Germanic tribes, Visigoths, Vandals, pushing into Roman territory, and the Huns under Attila causing chaos in the east.
The external pressures deserve more detailed examination. It wasn't just one group of barbarians. There were multiple waves of migration and invasion from different directions. The Huns pushed Germanic tribes westward, who then pressured Roman borders. Meanwhile, the Sasanian Empire in the east was a constant military threat that drained Roman resources.
And the nature of these external threats changed over time. Earlier barbarian groups had often been willing to be integrated into the Roman system, but later groups like the Visigoths and Vandals wanted to establish their own kingdoms within Roman territory. This shift from assimilation to conquest made the situation much more dangerous for the empire.
Yeah, and remember the sack of Rome in 410 AD by Alaric and the Visigoths? That was a huge symbolic blow, like Rome itself wasn't safe anymore.
But it's not just that. There were social issues, too. The population was declining due to plagues, and the wealthy elites were hoarding resources, leaving the poor to suffer.
Let's examine the cultural and social factors. One significant change was the decline of traditional Roman values, what the Romans called mores maiorum, or the ways of the ancestors. The old virtues of discipline, duty, and public service were replaced by self-interest and corruption among the ruling class.
And the rise of Christianity, while eventually becoming the state religion, initially created social divisions. Traditional Roman religion and the imperial cult had served as unifying forces, but Christianity challenged these established institutions and created new tensions within Roman society.
The demographic changes were also crucial. The Antonine Plague in the 2nd century and the Plague of Cyprian in the 3rd century killed millions, reducing the population significantly. This meant fewer taxpayers, fewer soldiers, and fewer workers to maintain the empire's infrastructure and economy.
Another often overlooked factor was environmental degradation. Centuries of intensive farming and deforestation led to soil exhaustion and erosion in many parts of the empire. This reduced agricultural productivity at a time when the empire needed more food to support its population and armies.
The technological stagnation is also worth noting. While Rome was brilliant at engineering and adopting existing technologies, they showed little innovation in new technologies that could have improved productivity or military effectiveness. This contrasted with their earlier history when they had been technological innovators.
And let's not forget about the administrative challenges. The Roman bureaucracy became incredibly bloated and inefficient. There were multiple layers of administration, overlapping jurisdictions, and widespread corruption. This made it difficult to implement policies effectively or respond quickly to crises.
And let's not forget the split of the empire into East and West. The Eastern Roman Empire, later Byzantium, lasted much longer, but the West, it just couldn't hold on.
The division between East and West became increasingly significant. The Eastern Empire had stronger economic foundations with wealthier provinces and control of key trade routes. The West, by contrast, was more rural and less economically developed. This economic disparity meant the East could better withstand the pressures that ultimately overwhelmed the West.
And the final collapse in 476 AD was really more symbolic than catastrophic. The Western Empire had been effectively controlled by barbarian generals for decades before that. The deposition of the last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was just the formal acknowledgement of a reality that had existed for some time.
What's fascinating is that Roman institutions and culture didn't disappear overnight. Roman law, Latin language, and administrative practices continued in many of the successor states. The Catholic Church preserved much Roman learning and became the main unifying institution in Western Europe after the empire's collapse.
And the legacy of Rome continued through the Byzantine Empire in the East, which lasted for another 1,000 years until 1453. So while the Western Roman Empire fell, Roman civilization continued in different forms and profoundly influenced the development of European civilization for centuries to come.
The fall of Rome teaches us important lessons about the fragility of complex societies. It shows how economic inequality, political instability, military overextension, and environmental pressures can combine to bring down even the most powerful civilizations. These are challenges that modern societies still grapple with today.
And it reminds us that civilizations are not static.
They either adapt and evolve, or they decline. The Romans failed to adapt to changing circumstances in time, and that ultimately led to their downfall. But their legacy continues to shape our world in countless ways, from our legal systems, to our languages, to our architectural traditions.
One final thought. The fall of Rome wasn't a single event, but a process that unfolded over centuries. This gradual decline allowed Roman culture and institutions to be absorbed and transformed rather than completely destroyed. In many ways, Rome didn't so much fall as it transformed into something new.
That's a beautiful way to think about it, Sophie. The echoes of Rome continued to resonate through time, reminding us of both the heights human civilization can achieve and the vulnerabilities that even the greatest empires must confront. It's a story that continues to fascinate historians and ordinary people alike centuries later. Before we wrap up, I want to mention one more fascinating aspect: the Roman legacy in our modern world. Many of our political institutions, legal concepts, and even our calendar have Roman origins. The idea of a republic, the concept of citizenship, and many principles of Roman law continue to influence Western civilization today.
And the Roman language, Latin, became the foundation for many modern European languages, including Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. Even English, while primarily Germanic, has a huge vocabulary derived from Latin. So, in a very real sense, we're still living with the echoes of Rome in our daily lives.
The architectural legacy is equally impressive. Roman engineering principles influence building techniques for centuries. The arch, the dome, concrete construction, these Roman innovations shaped the development of Western architecture. Many Roman roads, aqueducts, and buildings still stand today, a testament to their engineering prowess.
And let's not forget the cultural impact. Roman literature, philosophy, and art were preserved and studied throughout the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. The rediscovery of classical texts during the Renaissance helped spark the intellectual and cultural rebirth of Europe. So while the political empire fell, the cultural empire continued to shape Western civilization. So when we talk about the fall in 476 AD with the deposition of Romulus Augustulus, it was more of a, final straw. The infrastructure had been crumbling for ages.
Exactly. It's a classic case of multiple factors converging: economic, military, political, and no single event caused it. Historians still debate the primary causes today.
So what's the takeaway? Even the most powerful empires aren't immune to collapse if they can't adapt. And Rome's fall echoes in how we think about modern societies too.
That's a great point, Sophie. It reminds us that history isn't just about dates and battles. It's about complex systems and human decisions. For our next episode, we're thinking of diving into the Byzantine Empire, how the eastern half carried on Rome's legacy.
Ooh, I'm looking forward to that. Thanks for joining us on Time Echoes. Keep listening to the whispers of the past. Until next time, and make sure to subscribe the channel